Welcome to episode 54 of Reading Between the Reels. I'm Craig Dickinson. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you're a new listener, we're so glad you found us. If you've been enjoying the show, please tell someone about us. Send a tweet, post to Facebook, write a review in your favorite podcast catcher, or just recommend the show to a friend. Today on the show, I'm joined once again by Corey Heichman, and we're going to break down Black Panther, a film from 2018. As you guys know, Black Panther, Wakanda Forever is going to be out just shortly, so this is one of the big reasons we're going back to look at that film. So, Corey, why don't you start us off? What are your overall thoughts on Black Panther?
I tell you, I think this Black Panther movie, I would rank this in a top tier of Marvel movies from their 10 years. This is the origin story. Now, we've already had the character introduced, Winter Soldier. We've already had him introduced in some other spots. But in this, we go back and we discover more about him. So his origin story and his rise to his superhero status is taking place not from the origin, but from mid-level. He's already here. He's already known as the King of Wakanda. And so I think this is the part that I look at, and I think this movie was done really well. And I think Marvel focused in on this movie to make this a true to the storyline, to the plot, to the effect of this. I would rank this as Iron Man's movie and how it catapulted Iron Man to be such a favorite. Black Panther is that deep story, great writing, great acting, top tier actors in here, and focus to set Black Panther as a fan favorite.
Nice. Yeah, I was kind of surprised the very first time I saw it that it was set, well, when it was set. Like, it's basically a week after Civil War, where we've seen him introduced, and they're very, they do that with some exposition at the beginning, letting you know that his dad had just passed away. And it is, I like that you brought that up. I'm sure we'll talk about that more, that, it's not a traditional hero's journey. There is a hero's journey, but it's not from his beginning. There's kind of a rebirth for him. He's going to go through some different things. And the next level of a hero's journey. The thing that I'm struck by this time as I'm watching is how great Chadwick Boseman, and we've always known he's great in it, but the fact that he was already dying of cancer while he's filming this film is amazing. You can't watch it, in my opinion, without that in the back of your mind, that this guy is like really giving it all, for posterity, that he knows like this is a big thing that he's doing, and making that choice even when he's that sick.
And even at that, watching this again just to get ready for the show, you can't help but think that. You can't help but think this was a year. He was filming this a year after having that cancer diagnosis, and you can't help but look at what commitment and level of talent he brings and realize the hole that he left. And I think that's why Wakanda Forever. I'm really anticipating that story. Acknowledging him as such a big vacant hole, and even though we'll have a new Black Panther, but acknowledging who he was as a person and as a character in this movie, you cannot just replace those shoes with what he did.
Yeah, it's gonna be kind of cathartic, I think, for all of us in a lot of the ways that I think of like Princess Leia's death in Rise of Skywalker, kind of mirroring Carrie Fisher's passing too. That it's kind of a way for all of us to say goodbye. Anyone who's a fan of Chadwick Boseman to kind of have that kind of public goodbye, as it were.
Yes.
So let's go ahead and talk about cinematography. What did you have that you noticed for composition, color, camera work? There's a lot of great, interesting things in this film, I thought. So what do you think?
The color is incredible. And when you look at all the color that they brought into the costumes, the designs, just the tribal aspect that they bring in, and it is absolutely just filled with color and pulled off in such an incredible way. The thing that I really think stands out is how much the camera is always on a swivel, and it's either zooming in or zooming out from scenic views that are absolutely stunning, just showing the beauty of where Wakanda is. And especially in the beginning, as he's approaching Wakanda for the first time and says, "I never get tired of this," when they bust through the little shield. as they're passing through some herds running through the valley, and then as they pull into Wakanda, the viewer has the ship come right over the top of them, and you're seeing the city Wakanda down below, and then even to the fight that they have for the king, with the waterfall and everything. Absolutely stunning views of what they do. And so I think their cinematography and their costumes and the color, and then with the background music they bring into it, it is a complete movie. And their storyboard for this must have just been incredible in detail.
Yeah, I'm glad that you pulled in the movement of the camera, because I had a couple of things that were tied. Excuse me, were tied to that too. That did point out to me that I noticed. M'Baku on his throne when they go to find. They're going to give him the flower. There's a great shot of him on his throne, and it's really wide. He's got a couple of guys, 2 guards on his side, and he's kind of in the dark, and it just pulls in nice and slow. Gives you some time to kind of soak up that setting. Which they also do a similar thing, where after Killmonger starts burning up all of the heart-shaped herb underground there. In that little garden temple, it's a shot from behind of him, and then it's kind of pulling back. It's like the opposite effect.
Yes. And
you get to see like all of the destruction that he's caused, and both the shots are in the dark, but it's really interesting how you get to see more. Like, it's very intentional. Like, watch this. This is what's important. He's the guy that caused it, and then they kind of bring into M'Baku, and he becomes less intimidating once he gets up there, and then he kind of breaks the ice with a joke and stuff too.
Yeah. That whole scene with him burning the Panther flowers, and that was so painful, because that scene is so frustrating for me, just showing him just demolishing that, and him standing in front of the fire and just burning down everything, which it used to just frustrate me the first time that I watched that, and it distracted me a little bit. But having watched it again, that part made so much more sense for the cinematography-wise, because as he's burning everything down, you realize the level of, even though he's now the new king, he has a disgust, and he's been, left behind and watched this civilization advance and the things they could be doing and joining the world. And so watching it burn was a goal, is something that he wanted to do, and there's not going to be another king after me mentality. And so burn it all down, because this is not the spot where we're going to stay. We're going out.
Right.
And it makes more sense for who his character is the second time you watch this through.
Nice. A couple other things I noticed this time that I hadn't noticed before was after the fight. You mentioned the fight on the waterfall, and T'Challa falls, which is some great camera work there too, when it's bird's eye view watching him fall, so you kind of sucked in with him. It's very personal for us too. We kind of go on that journey with him. Is that the very next shot after that? It's a night shot of Wakanda, which is clearly symbolic, right? It's metaphorically dark just as well as it's dark there, in there. So like darkness has fallen upon Wakanda. I also, the color in this, you mentioned that earlier. I was struck by a couple of things this time. That when we see Oakland at the beginning, it's kind of this sickly yellow, almost disgusting, rotten look to it. It's just kind of how it's portrayed. There's something wrong in Oakland versus what we see in Wakanda, where it's like the natural colors in there in the daylight. Some other things, obviously, purple is a color that is usually associated with royalty and has been. And then you have, the afterlife when they go. Well, the heart-shaped herb is obviously purple too. Their power on the suit is purple. But even in the afterlife, and this is what I thought was interesting. The first time that T'Challa takes the herb after being crowned king officially, and when he fights M'Baku, is that the afterlife is kind of this purple-blue hue, and there's all the other kings that are there. The second time when he does it, it's not that. Did you know? It's earth tones this time, which I thought was interesting, and I took that as a way of, he is coming back to the real world. The real world is not that shade, and so he belongs, in life. He should not be there, and so that's kind of where he's meant to go. it's a really interesting choice that they returned, and it wasn't a different. I never noticed it before, but it was a different hue this time through.
And I gotta believe these are the intentional choices that they do, because I think another thing to look at is with Killmonger, just to harken back to that scene where he's burning it all down. Did you notice as it pans back that there are two Panthers in that scene? And this whole movie, this whole story and origin here is two Panthers, is Killmonger and T'Challa, who are both mirror images of each other. T'Challa is mercy and we need to do things right and be right, and Killmonger's burning it down on opposite sides. One's on the right, one's on the left, and they're a mirror image. And the two Panthers, as he's burning everything, are complete mirror images of each other. When you look at it, they're both, one stepping forward with its left foot and the other one stepping forward with its right foot. So it's a mirror image. And I think that's an intentional choice of there's two Panthers that are going to fight this out in the end. And I think when they do those kinds of things and they put those little nuances in, it pulls the viewer in to see those without having to make it an extra line or to be so obvious sometimes, because people are then looking in the movie and being a part of it.
Yeah, that's a great catch. And I would just add to that the kind of the mirror image thing is that when you have the second fight at the waterfall, it's shot very differently than the first fight. When we still have, the bird's eye view looking down as the circle closes in, but we have the fight when it's shot horizontally is much closer. A lot of quick cuts. You're seeing a lot of reaction shots from T'Challa and Killmonger, much more so than you saw with T'Challa and M'Baku.
Yeah.
But my favorite thing they did cinematography-wise is after that fight, when Killmonger enters the throne room, the camera is upside down.
Yes.
And then it pivots, circles around, and there's no other way to read that other than, things are metaphorically upside down. They're not the way.
That was such an intentional buildup. Absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, I love that. And as he reaches the throne, he's walking toward the throne to take his place as the king, and that's when it turns over. And you're like, this is not normal. But what a great arresting thing to do to get your audience's attention.
It was disorienting, and the music that was going along with that is absolutely something that is so intentional to pull you in. The world is upside down with what he's doing.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. I enjoyed that a lot. Do you have anything else for cinematography before we move on?
I do, and there's one scene with Killmonger that I think, and I always love to look at these types of movies and try and find something that I feel like the director made an intentional choice, whether it's the scene or setting something up to kind of build up who the character is. And it's one of the things that I noticed with Killmonger as he's walking into Wakanda, and he's walking away from the sunlight. The sunlight is behind him, so he has got his back on the light as he enters Wakanda. But then when he dies, T'Challa takes him out to the edge there, and then he dies facing the sunlight. And when you think of the sunlight as part of the character, then you start to realize T'Challa was the light. This was the king and the right and the morality that he was trying to bring to it. Killmonger's walking away from the light as he enters, and then he dies facing in the light, facing T'Challa. And so I think it's kind of a way of just highlighting just who that character was, that there's a darkness as he was entering, and then there's a light as he died. And even in his final moments, T'Challa is still looking and saying, I think we can save you. Even though he refuses, but he delivers a powerful line, but it's the same point to say, the Black Panther is the light, is the hero of this story. And so I thought it was a very good, powerful moment. I think I notice little scenes like that, and I like those kinds of scenes because they pull me in as a viewer. And so I think you don't have just the character sometimes. You have the setting, the mood, everything that's brought in with what they use behind the character sometimes in small little nuances.
Yeah, that's definitely not an accident. That's a great catch. I like that. I like that a lot. As for sound, for this one, I have to say that I love the soundtrack. Ludwig Göransson is amazing. It's very different than a lot of the stuff that he's done. He'd done He had done Creed prior to this,
Mm-hmm.
which is very heavily borrowing like from Bill Conti and the Rocky themes. This is very different. You know, he had some collaborators for sure, but using things like the talking drum, which uses a lot in the timbale, and some classical African instruments, along with some classical strings and some, you know, some pop diegetic music mixed in too. It's a really interesting soundtrack.
And I haven't sat down and just listened to just the soundtrack, but in the movie, just the way they bring in small things with the music was powerful as the scenes are unfolding and the camera's pulling back or zooming in. Just small things setting the whole mood for it. And so I think it's the soundtrack is very well done throughout the movie and adds to that effect.
Yeah, and a special shout out to Claw, played by Andy Serkis, singing "What Is Love" by Hathaway. That might be one of my favorite. Just it's so lame, and he's just like, I'm gonna torture you back for grabbing me. Just it's hilarious. There's some other great diegetic music in there too, but the Weeknd and Kendrick Lamar and Baba Maal has the Wakanda theme, which is great and just kind of spine tingling. But I always just crack up when I see him singing "What Is Love."
Andy Serkis is like can just do so many things. He is so great in this movie, in his roles, everything. And he commits to it, and he gives a great character, and he does a great job. That "What Is Love" scene is just funny. He brings you in with a little bit of humor and makes you know he's such a bad guy and such a terrible villain, but he pulls you in there and makes you laugh, and it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, apparently he's an inspiring musician. You know, he talks about that in Busan too. He's like, yeah, just because Martin Freeman's character says like, get a mixtape coming out. He's like, yeah, get him a mixtape. Let's do it. So, yeah, he's a Renaissance man apparently.
Oh, good.
Yeah. As far as special effects go, on this one, I think my favorite one is the Kimoyo beads, the little trill sound that they make. Is just a cool sound, and I've always liked the kind of the suit activating sound. There's Marvel went into like that whole nanobot thing for a while. The Iron Man suit was nanotech, and Spider-Man's suit was nanotech. I think this is one of the cooler ones though, where it comes out of the necklace, and it's kind of almost like this electronic kind of chittering, almost like a bug. It's almost natural. It's a weird mix of those two things.
It is really good. I think this is after this is when Iron Man has the nanotech, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's not until Infinity War, which comes out after this.
Yeah. I think the nanotech and the beads, those are fantastic. I think the special effects, I think the CGI in this is incredible because it could be said that in some of the CGI things that Marvel has done just in the last couple of years have not been on par with this. They spent time and labor and man hours to make the special effects in this movie work really well.
Yeah, the only thing I don't like CGI wise is like the fight at the end. That feels a little hollow to me. A little bit like Neo and Agent Smith going at it in the last. I was going to say the last. I'm going to pretend the fourth one doesn't exist for a second. In the Matrix, what is it? Revolutions? Is that what that third one is?
It does. It feels like very much that it's the second scene where he fights the 100 agents.
Yeah, that it feels a little bit like that to me.
I thought it felt more like a video game cutscene.
Oh yeah, I'll go with that too.
Is how it feels, and there's so much big stuff there. I don't know how they could pull that off. But the two actors, I mean, Michael B. Jordan and when they're just fighting in this scene, it is absolutely. I mean, Chadwick Boseman, the amount of time that they spent in that fight must have just been amazing because the way the suit comes on and off, I gotta believe they're really standing there. That the whole fight's not CGI.
Sure.
Just the scenery and everything behind it, but
yeah, it's like the falling through the chasm thing.
Yeah.
Just feels a little silly. But what do you like? You couldn't actually do that with stuntmen, clearly.
No,
they kind of throw physics out the window there.
Yeah.
There's some great vocal sounds in this one too. I mentioned the exposition to kind of go over where this is set. right? I mean, they give you Oakland 1992, and then this, and they go, well, what times? Well, they tell you it's right after Civil War because he's watching the news about his dad. I've always liked the exposition at the beginning too. I think that's just a great way to kind of set the mythology. You have Bast and the vibranium and all the origin of Wakanda, all of that happening. I think it's done in a really efficient and interesting way.
The thing about the vocal sounds that I think is interesting because I was watching it with that, was to realize how many times Chadwick Boseman, they show him and there's literally a few seconds before he speaks. And it's a comment where you're waiting for him to say something. You're almost anticipating like, oh, he's got to say something here. And you see his expression as he looks down, he looks away, he's pondering, he's thinking of all these moments before he speaks. He doesn't just, the camera cuts to him and he says his line. Camera cuts to him, he says his line. It's the camera cuts to him and you see this kingly mentality of weighing the options in my mind before I even speak. And so there's a lot of moments where there's that type of thing where you see his acting beyond just his voice. He's looking, he's paying attention, his eyes are moving as he's considering what was said and what to do. And it's you see the weight of a king on him when you feel that.
Yeah. So are you ready to move down to performance? Because I think that's a natural bridge for that. Because I had a comment to kind of add to that is the last, what you think is going to be the last line of the film before we get to the credits and then the mid credits and the post credits. The kid asks him like, "Who are you?" And he just sits. He has that pause and like he could like, "I'm Black Panther" or something. But nothing would be as cool as him just like giving him a knowing look.
Yeah.
Right. It's that. Yeah, I'm gonna wait. I don't have to be. I'm not pithy. And this is, I've seen other videos of, I think Honest Trailers might have done one, and he was like, he just won't quip. Because he's like the one Marvel hero who doesn't really have anything that's snarky. Yes. Which is interesting, which I like a lot. That's when we did Doctor Strange, that's one thing I brought up, is that I think that movie suffered from kind of having to be in the Marvel mold where he had to make little quips. And at the time it was kind of funny, but I don't know if it necessarily ages that well. Where I think this film will probably age a little bit better, other than like M'Baku's little joke about vegetarians and we're going to eat you. That's like the one that I'm like, all right, that's kind of a groaner. I get why that's funny, but like, it doesn't feel like that's what he would say in that moment.
Oh, but I love that line. I thought that line was incredible. I was laughing. I mean, that was a laugh out loud moment. I don't take that lightly to LOL. I really LOL'd when he said that,
and that's fine.
It's just great. His laugh afterwards about it, and it just was very snarky that I embraced that part. So it was great.
So speaking of lines, I did want to point out that's interesting that a lot of this is spoken in Xhosa, which is a real language, which is cool. So we get some subtitles in like that African language, which is interesting and very immersive. It's a great way to kind of bring you in. But I don't know like what kind of line. I think this time I was like, which lines do I want to bring out? Because this is not really, I would think, a quotable movie other than saying Wakanda Forever. I mean, that's like the thing that you hear the most and kind of sticks in your brain. But did you have any lines of dialogue that were like this time you were like, yeah, that's kind of cool. I really like that. It's representative of character or funny or any of those things.
Yes, and the one that I really think of is the two lines that stand out the most to me. When T'Challa has the second dream and he's talking to his dad, and he says, "We let the fear of our discovering stop us from doing what's right." And when I look at the movie, the Wakanda being tucked away and hidden away, and for them protecting, I mean, they're going after they don't want any of their metal out there. They don't want to go vibranium getting out because then it leads back to them. So they're protecting the isolation of Wakanda. And instead he looks and realizes what that done, created Killmonger. He even says he is a monster of our making. And that dialogue, I thought, really helps to drive home the movie, that the Black Panther has to bring Wakanda in. They can't be hidden away anymore. They can't be tucked away. They have to come and they have to join, the Avengers, the Infinity War, the Endgame. They have to join this fight and for what's right. So I think it stood out to me more than it did the first time.
Yeah, I think there was a kind of a through line with certain lines set throughout the film. I was like, thematically, it feels like these lines are what his hero's journey, what the theme of Black Panther is, and it starts with the first time he's in the fight with M'Baku, and his mom shouts, "Show them who you are," because it really is his journey to figure out who he is and what kind of king he's going to be. And kind of following with that, you have the first time that he talks to his dad in the afterlife. His dad does a line where he says, "You're a good man with a good heart, and it's hard for a good man to be king," which we don't know that's, there's, well, we do, because we've seen the beginning, we saw the prologue, but T'Challa doesn't know the depths of what that means. He does not know the compromises and the choices that his dad has made that he would not approve of.
Yeah.
There's another one, I believe it's his mom, that says, "You can't let your father's mistakes define who you are. You get to decide what kind of king you're going to be." So throughout, it's really, like we mentioned, like he's already a hero, he's already the king, but he also has to decide what kind of king he's going to be, because this is kind of his first big trial that he has to go through. Yeah. We know he was raised in privilege, being royalty, this is the first time where he's completely on his own. The death of the mentor has happened, right? So that part of his journey has happened. Now he's on the road of trials by himself, and this is the first, and he has to face his father's evil as well.
Well, his father even says that. His father even says, "I embraced this. I took the lie to protect Wakanda." And in the moment when he made that choice and he made that decision, he did what he had to. And that which is that kingly weight. The king makes wrong decisions too. And so but T'Challa has to rise up above it and realize that his kingdom's being threatened, and he has to remove Killmonger from the throne because of his father's mistakes. So you're right. That is a powerful moments, and just in dialogue and small lines that they slip in there. The one line I will say that frustrates me sometimes is when T'Challa rises back up from the plane and says, "I never yielded," which is a beautiful line.
Yeah.
I love that, and I just am not a fan of Michael B. Jordan saying, "Sup?"
Yeah.
It
just
felt too wrong for that moment, it didn't feel like that fit the place, the dialogue, the gravity of everything that's going on. You just found out the guy that you were supposed to have killed to take the throne is standing right in front of you and saying, "I never yielded," and we go, "What's up?" So,
yeah, he's trying to minimize it, right? Yeah. I mean, he should be like, "Oh, I'm in big trouble," right? Yeah, he's fronting to coin a phrase. And
he throws out the line and says, "No,
apologies for saying fronting." Yeah. And I had that line too, because I like the end of it, and this is the closest that T'Challa gets to Quippy. Like, "And as you can see, I'm not dead."
Yes. Like
that's a great moment. And that's the "what's up" that kind of sours a little bit. Yeah. Again, I apologize for saying frontin'. That was wrong. I'm so sorry.
No, it just feels like that didn't fit that moment, and it didn't fit the gravity of everything that was about to happen, the battle that is now going to rage.
Yeah. So here's my hot take, that Chadwick Boseman is so great in this movie that Michael B. Jordan does not hold a candle to his performance. Like, I like Michael B. Jordan as an actor, but the level of gravitas that Boseman has is not equaled by Michael B. Jordan. I do not see them as equals, because it's good. I was like, Boseman's just that much better. I actually like Sterling K. Brown, who plays his dad, who plays the uncle. I'm trying to see if I can remember the name off the top of my head. Njobu. The level of gravitas that he presents, I think, is much more formidable. And again, I like Michael B. Jordan, but he's kind of, I don't know, it just doesn't ring as true as it does for Boseman. Maybe that's just a personal thing, but I've always thought, like, oh yeah, there's a level there, and then there's a step down, and that's where Michael B. Jordan's at.
I absolutely agree with you. I think Michael B. Jordan in this movie is, you put Michael B. Jordan in Creed, I even thought he was great in Fantastic Four. I liked him in Fantastic Four. But in this one, it is Chadwick Boseman. It is the top level actor of this movie. Michael B. Jordan does great, but I feel like Chadwick Boseman is everything in, and some of that is, like I said, he's not just speaking. You see the weight of the king on his shoulders and his emotions, and even him yelling at his father in the dream, the second one. And so I feel like Chadwick Boseman is at this level of absolutely the number one of this movie. But you cannot take away Michael B. Jordan's abilities. He is a phenomenal actor. And Creed, there is no better Creed character for him. I mean, the level that he's commitment, that what he's done with that franchise, absolutely. I'd watch him in any Rocky movie, a Creed movie. Just he's that good.
Yeah, and I'm gonna be super clear. I don't want to disparage Michael B. Jordan, because I do. I love Creed 2 and Creed 1 and Creed 2. And when Creed 3 comes out next year, we got to do Creed, because that's a great flick. And I love Michael B. Jordan as an actor. It's hard to do this properly. Chadwick Boseman, he's just a level above. That's all I'm saying. Yeah.
He really is. Chadwick Boseman, and that's the loss that I think we feel in this. Is you look at this and you just think, oh man, it is so tragic, that he's died, but he is such a huge hole for this show, because I think what he brought to this character was so incredible.
Yeah. Body language, facial expressions. Do you have anything in that category? You have to put the Wakandan salute. I mean, that's kind of the big thing. Other than, that and Wakanda Forever, like the two big things you're going to walk away from with this movie. We did mention, that when he comes up and says, never yielded, and as you can see, I'm not dead. He's walking toward him. I love that scene because of the way he's presenting himself with his arms open wide, like he's got nothing to hide, no fear, just come and get some.
Yes. Some of the body language is great. Is with and I've got two scenes in my mind. The one is when they're driving and they're trying to get Claw, and they're in the downtown and they're driving, and I can't even remember which of the Royal Guard girls is driving, and Okoye is in the passenger seat, and she gets out of the car and uses her spear and just sticks it in the top of the roof, and it's this beautiful car, and the girl that's driving,
Nakia,
gives a look over like, because this whole movie, Wakanda is so beautiful and everything is so beautiful and traditional looking. And so, you value that look and taking care and everything. And so when she stabbed the spear into the roof, it was almost an insult of tarnishing the car, because it was so beautiful. Anyway, so that stood out to me, that's that small body language. And then the interrogation scene, where Okoye and T'Challa are talking, and it's where Martin Freeman, Everett Ross, is making a comment to her, and then right as he's about to walk in, and they just have a little and go back and forth about him and how he's talking, and Chadwick tells her to kind of calm down, and she goes, "Oh, Americans," It was such a great scene of just, if we go in there, we can get what we need to, just, but we're playing the part of, we're just, trying to blend in right here. So it was such a great little thing. And that the body language, the facial expressions, you can't just mimic that. You can't just tell someone, hey, this is what I want you to do. I want you to look at basically the Black Panther King and go, give him a hard time.
Yeah. Yeah, she's great. She's great in that. Okoye, the actress, Denai Guerrera, I don't know if I'm saying it right. She's from Walking Dead, so y'all know you're a fan of Walking Dead. You've seen her and many other things. She's great in that. The Dora Milaje are fantastic in this. All of them are very stoic, very intimidating, but without being like, it feels natural to me. Like, it doesn't feel like they're not superhuman. They're not invulnerable. We see them die, for instance, in the last battle with Killmonger. But I love their uniforms. And for some reason, I never noticed before that Okoye has the gold up at the top, and the rest of them have silver, which makes sense because she's the ranking officer there.
Never noticed that.
Yeah. But the costumes are amazing for this film. I mean, you've got all the different tribes have very different things. You've got the border tribe has blue with kind of a wood. The river tribe is green with like shells and different things like that. Of course, you got the purple of the Black Panther suit, and the Dora Milaje, as I already mentioned. Just so many different, very distinct. It goes to world building, right? That all these places they feel real. Like they've been established for a really long time.
Yeah, I think they definitely put some intentionality in all that to make it stand out like that. I think some of the facial expressions and between Wakabi and Okoye in the final battle, because he says, "Would you kill me, my love?" and she says, "For Wakanda, yes."
Yeah.
And Daniel Kaluuya, he does such an incredible job, because I kind of see the conflict in him throughout the whole thing when I can't tell, because he wants with Killmonger, he sides with Killmonger in that final battle and not with T'Challa, but then he yields when she says, "Yeah, I'll kill you for Wakanda." And I think it's just powerful. Like in his facial expressions in there always catch me, always have me looking at him, because I feel like there's a struggle in his face when they're sitting there and they're talking and arguing. When Michael B. Jordan first comes into Wakanda, and they're arguing, and he tells them who he is. I mean, you can see he's the one who says he knows who Killmonger is. And so so it just, the way he does some great facial expressions, and makes you really pull into that this man is close to the throne, and he has some strong opinions and thoughts too. And even in the final battle, and then finally yields because she says that his love would kill him for Wakanda if she had to. So.
Yeah. The cast is top notch in this film. I think across the board they're all great, and we'll talk more about characters in just a second. But I also wanted to mention the necklaces. The difference in the necklaces I think is interesting. I spent some time early when he gets the first, he gets to pick in Shuri's lab, and he gets the kind of subtle silver necklace, kind of low key. And then you see at the end that Killmonger has chosen this really ostentatious gold one we saw earlier. And like, it's super dramatic. It is not subtle at all. And that speaks to their characters, of course.
Yeah.
Anything else for performance before we talk about setting and design?
I think one more thing for performance, I think, is T'Challa's sister, the little sister. Some of the beginning, she's very playful with him, and they have the relationship shows in there, like when he first lands in Wakanda, and Okoye actually dismisses the rest of the guard and they go off, and then there's a little bit of razzing him. They're giving him a hard time about him freezing when they were in the jungle, and then the sister even flips him off, which I thought, oh my goodness, this is the king, and you just flipped him off out in the open, and so, there's just that little bit of sister and brother there. And then when he gets the suit and he kicks the suit and she's videotaping it, and he says immediately, delete that recording. And so you see a little bit of that performance of just them having this closeness as a brother and a sister would among the royalty. And so I thought that always stood out, and I think she does a great job with that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because they are royals, but they're not like stodgy, like very formal. They have a very common brother, sister, sibling. Like, she's a typical little sister just trying to get his goat, and they have a very close bond for sure.
Yes.
And they're not related, but it sure feels like they are.
They're not related? He says, what?
No, I mean like in real life, actors.
Oh, real life.
Yeah, in the movie they are. Yeah.
I was like, wait.
Wait, spoiler! I missed that. No. Yeah. As far as setting design goes, what's interesting about this, I think, is that this is filmed primarily on a soundstage, like a lot of Marvel things are. That's why we see the little peach at the end of all of the things. A lot of it's filmed in Atlanta on a soundstage at UE Screen Gem Studios, where most of that took place. Like the waterfall was built on a soundstage, which is interesting. the only live location footage that you're getting is in South Korea, which I mean that's pretty amazing. That like it seemed like we could film like that final battle on a field somewhere, right? That would be where they do it on location. But they did the car chase. There was like 150 cars and like 700 people in downtown Korea, South Korea, and in Busan, and that's where they filmed on location.
That's the place that was on location.
Yeah.
You know, and in the beginning of this, I even said where I loved how they pull back and you see some beautiful scenery, and then you're telling me it was all CGI.
Yeah, but I mean it's beautiful. It works.
It's absolutely beautiful work.
Right, and it's like it reminds me a little bit of the volume, like we see like the Mandalorian, but it's done even. It's impressive.
Yeah, it's very impressive.
Yeah, you do have a little bit more too. I mean, like there's the Sweet Auburn neighborhood in Atlanta, which doubles for Oakland, so that's also on location too. So that's not CGI. That's not on a soundstage somewhere, rather. I thought it was also interesting in my research. I found that Wakanda is a little bit based on the country of Lesotho because it's fairly isolationist, kind of in the middle. It's surrounded in a place where it's kind of blocked off. So that's interesting. There's a lot of things. Obviously, Wakanda is not a real country, but there's a lot of real world influences on that. It's kind of a mixture of a lot of different real life things. Set decoration. Every time I see Shuri's lab, I think it looks like an Apple store. A little bit. It kind of feels like that too.
It does.
Lots of white. But it also has a lot of like African tribal art as an accent to kind of bring that in too. So it's kind of an interesting mix. There's a lot of, and that's a lot of things they see in this film too, is there's a lot of very modern and a lot of very ancient and traditional kind of mixed together in a really natural way.
Well, and it all fits. It fits together well. I mean, the costumes and what they're wearing and they're walking around. I did have this thought this very last time watching this, where when they're walking through and he's looking at his suits and she's saying, "Okay, kick this suit," and that whole scene. I did think, you never see. Nobody ever walks around in sweatpants and t-shirts, and so they're all in such formal gowns and formal gear all the time, and it's as royalty would be. And as you for stuff like this, but I feel like sometimes if you're in a lab, you're going to have more of a dress down than a formal gown, but it does feel like an Apple store, like you said. It's got that very modern look and feel to it, but at the same time with the traditional art and the traditional costumes.
Yeah, and as far as props go, I mean, we have to point out, we talked a little bit about the Kamoya beads originally, which is interesting that they basically do anything the plot needs them to do. So, I mean, I have some minor gripes with this movie. They're kind of like the magic beads that do whatever. Yes. They're not really explained. It's kind of, we have a bead for that. We can do spinal surgery, or it's an EMP, or we can remotely control a car, or whatever you need.
Okay, now this brings up my one of my frustrations with this is the beads and the planes and some of this, and it reminds me of a story when I first watched Superman Returns. It came out and I was in the theater, and it's the part where Superman Returns goes down into the ground and he picks up the continent and carries it up into space. And as I'm sitting there, the guy next to me says, "Well, that's just too much." And in my head, in that moment, I thought to myself, "Buddy, we're watching a show, and you bought a ticket for a man who wears a cape and has a suit and can shoot lasers out his eyes and fly through the air. And this is the moment where my disbelief sets in. And this is the moment where, nope, this is too much. You've overpowered it." And so in his mind, he looked at that and said, "This is a point where you tried to write yourself out into a story and you kind of overpowered it." And I feel like sometimes you see that in these movies where the fantasy and the fantastical elements, we write these beads that will do everything. Oh, I've got one I push this bead and I can control the car. I push this, I can control the plane. I push this and all of a sudden it's a cockpit right here for this plane that's remote controlled. And so sometimes we do get that. We write it in there, and is there a point where it's too much? Is there a point where you, as a fan watching the movie, go, "Well, that's just a little too far, a little too advanced, or too easy"? the technology to fit inside of a small bead that way. And so sometimes when I see that, I agree with you. It's like we kind of write our way in there. But at the same time, when you're immersed in the story, you embrace it. You go.
Yeah, it's kind of like this movie has more in common with like Thor than it does with Iron Man. It's more fantasy. It's space rock that came down and does all these magical things.
Yeah.
As opposed to like hard science fiction where we're going to explain how these things would happen. So you kind of just have to go, all right, I'm just going to go. It's a magic space rock.
Yeah.
I'm good with that. Kind of like Eternium in Black Adam, which we'll get to. Same,
yes.
Very much the same kind of deal. I love Claw's arm cannon.
Yes.
That's just fun. And I want to talk about Claw in just a minute, but we'll get to characters. The thing I always forget is about the royal signet rings and why that's so important. It's a very small prop, but super important, right? Because Killmonger brings that up, and he's like, this is my right to the throne, right? I am royalty. I am one of the family because I have this tiny little ring. And that's a huge moment for T'Challa to see. Oh yeah, he's telling the truth.
Well, because that's his father's ring, right?
Yep, and Jobu's ring.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, I think, and they do a great job of pulling you in to notice it when he comes in and rescues Claw from the interrogation as he's jumping into the car, into the getaway vehicle, and he shoots T'Challa with the cannon, the little grenade launcher, knocks him down. Which I didn't like that part because I thought the suit should have absorbed that, right? It should have released that energy back. But for the moment, he hits the ground, and as he looks right at his neck and sees the ring. And that's what starts him coming back, and he notices that. He saw that ring.
Yep.
Because he said, this man had the same ring that I do. So it was very powerful, and they do a good job of bringing it in, but introducing it over here. So you knew about it before he brought it up.
Yeah, that's a great use of prop, I think. It's really like as opposed to kind of the magic beads that can do everything, which we've talked about. But this feels like it's a small but very significant thing that would solve a lot of problems. Well, how do you know this guy's actually a legit contender for the throne? Well, because he has this. So as far as characters go, when we talked about most of them, we mentioned briefly Nakia, played by Lupita Nyong'o, who's great. You mentioned her expressions in the car when Okoye sticks that spear in there and then magically doesn't get shot by the people. I don't know why they didn't shoot at her. That's weird. They keep shooting at the car. But she's fantastic as always. Martin Freeman is fun. I love that you get Martin Freeman and Andy Serkis in a scene together. So you get Bilbo and Gollum in a scene together. That's fun.
Which is just great. You can't put those kinds of relationships together that you can't help but think that when they're filming this, they're just having a great time. They're talking, they're reminiscing. Even Martin Freeman and Tony Stark, Robert Downey Jr. Just being together, just legends together. So
yeah. Some things I found in my research that I thought were fascinating. I mean, again, it sounds like I ripped on Michael B. Jordan, but he's really good in this movie. He's just not Chadwick Boseman good. But one thing I love that he did was he was added to the cast late, and then he pretty much kept to himself and kept away from people, didn't socialize with people during the movie, which makes a lot of sense because he's very isolated from everybody else. And so I think a little bit of method acting that's going there. But one thing I thought was really cool and that I pulled out this time was that when he has his ancestral plane vision, that he is a child in that vision. Because he's so stuck in that moment. Like he is in a lot of ways, he's kind of acting out.
That's a good point. He is a child in that, and he switches when he starts crying, he switches to an adult.
Mm-hmm.
And even his father is crying in that scene because he makes a comment about no tears for me, and he says everybody dies. And I feel like his father at that moment sees the weight of what he's done, where he's been.
Yeah,
that was an interesting intentional scene.
And they don't tell us like how there's not physics or whatever of the afterlife works, but I always assume that that's kind of like the to go back to the Matrix, the residual self-image, right? That's how he sees himself in a lot of ways. He still feels like he's that kid because he still talks about it repeatedly throughout throughout his journey back to Wakanda.
Great. A great idea.
We mentioned Martin Freeman multiple times, doing an American accent in this. Pretty good American accent for a British guy. That's fun.
My wife watched this with me last night, and she said the same thing. She goes, "He has a pretty good American accent."
Yeah, not bad. Let's see. We mentioned Letitia Wright as Shuri. Yeah, she's great. Angela Bassett has a very small role, but as T'Challa's mom, Ramonda, is good. Forrest Whitaker. I always forget Forrest Whitaker is in this movie.
Oh, I think he was great.
He is, and he's got the purple robes too, which is very like he's kind of the right-hand man of the king, so he's got that royalty, but also Bast and the vibranium infused heart-shaped herb are purple too, so he's kind of the high priest of that, and so it makes sense that he would have that same coloring.
Well, it was painful when he died, when Killmonger kills him, because you looked at his character and who he was, and as he was down there fighting, and he protects, and saves T'Challa from getting killed, and he explains all the things. You just can't. When he was there with his father when he got killed, and anyway, Forrest Whitaker's his whole thing is absolutely incredible. His character, I loved it.
So I'm going to get to another gripe. Why did they kill Claw? Why could Killmonger not have just captured him and brought him up and dropped him off as a prisoner? Because I can't think for the life of me what he gains from killing him versus dropping him off as a prisoner. Because he's neutralized. T'Challa didn't want to kill him.
Yeah.
He's still showing power over him either way. So what do you think about that? It was
an anticlimactic death. He just gets shot right there. The only thing that I think makes sense there is the notion that Killmonger kills the girl that Claw takes hostage. And then when one of the female guards at the end, Killmonger takes hostage, he kills her too. And just that his notion of accomplices and people he can just throw them away. And so, but I agree. Claw's death is kind of an anticlimactic end to it.
Well, I think you just fixed it for me there, because it feels like a natural. Now that you've explained it that way, it feels like a natural character moment that Killmonger would not care about Claw. It doesn't do him any good to not kill him. He's already served whatever purposes that Killmonger needs.
And his body's the ticket into Wakanda.
Exactly.
When he's walking away from the sun and heading to Wakanda, he brings the body as a ticket.
Yeah. I was just sad to see Andy Serkis die, and then it's whenever you have a great villain like that, it's kind of we won't get to see him again. That's kind of sad. But I think you explained it well. That like for Killmonger's character, for him to have let him live doesn't make sense at that point. Okay, I'll go with that. Another thing that I always think is cool is that you have, I hope I don't mispronounce his name, but John Connie, I think is how you say his name. He plays T'Chaka, and then his son Atandwa plays the younger version of King T'Chaka in the flashback scenes. So there's a reason that T'Challa's dad, when he's younger, looks a lot like T'Challa's dad when he's older, because they're father and son. So that's kind of cool.
Did not know that.
Yeah, and then of course we have Sebastian Stan shows up as Bucky Barnes at the end, really briefly to kind of tie everything together. Hero's Journey, we've kind of talked about that all the way through. You have anything that you wanted to add to that, or have we covered it?
Not to Hero's Journey. I think other than to say, like you said before, this is kind of a rebirth of the hero journey. And that's one of the things I think that makes this so effective. We're getting an origin story midway through. He's already there. He's already been established. And so we're still getting another rebirth origin story to make him even stronger of a character than just bringing in the Black Panther into the Avengers movies and moving forward.
Yeah, I'd go with that. It reminds me a bit of Aquaman in that way, where you have to do. You've introduced the character in a team up movie, and now you get his kind of his origin story, where he actually becomes who he's supposed to be. It's kind of a similar track, and I mean, not to say that this is the same, but in some ways, it reminds me of that. Like that's a good way to go. Where like we've introduced the character, now we're going to do the, because typically Marvel is solo movie, then team up, and so on. But this way, I think that kind of retrofitting works here.
Well, and I feel like movies are starting to do this more because we know the story, we know the origin. We I think the Spider-Man movies is kind of a symbol of that, where the new Spider-Man with Tom Holland, we didn't have to see Uncle Ben die again. We didn't have to see. I mean, we saw Aunt May die in the movie, but we didn't have to go back and reestablish how Peter Parker gets his powers and move. We all just said we embrace who he is as a character. Let's get him in the story and go. And I think sometimes every single iteration of a character does not have to have an origin again. And it's one of the reasons I think movies like Fantastic Four may have struggled, is because we go back and we have to redo a whole different Fantastic Four origin story. And so I think this is, if you're going to do an origin story, it has to be something that's going to really elevate that character. We don't have to go back and have a reboot every time we have a new character coming in. So we can embrace that there's a history and there's a story that got them there, and then move forward.
Yeah, and that reminds me of the way they did the Incredible Hulk intro, which I think is still one of the greatest ways to have done like a soft reboot with it, where you just have it all in the opening credits, and then we're in. We don't need, that's it. Like you can do that whole story in 3 to 5 minutes if you need to. Like, and I'm wondering, you mentioned Fantastic Four multiple times, how they'll be incorporated in the MCU, because you could do a similar thing to that, where you could just have, because you don't want to do the whole drawn out, they're going into space and they get hit with the radiation. You don't need to do that, but you could do something similar in like an opening credit sequence really quickly.
Yes.
For instance. Speaking of that, world building, this obviously fits squarely in the world of the MCU, where we have characters we've seen before. But it's fairly self-contained, I think.
I have one frustration that I share, and it's interesting you brought up Aquaman, because I believe I rank DC's Aquaman and Marvel's Black Panther in this world building element together. Is they are two worlds that are so far advanced they could absolutely affect the entire planet and change things, but they're hidden away, they're tucked away, and we have no inkling of them being there. We have like they're so far hidden and removed from everything that nobody knows about them. And then the whole point of their movie, Aquaman and Black Panther, is that, okay, now the world has to know about us now when we come forward. And so you have this technology that's so far advanced, the beads and everything, and where Martin Freeman gets healed from a bullet wound in a day and says, oh, bullets don't heal overnight. And she says, here they do. And so it's like, my goodness, think of the world is a terrible place outside that fantastic world that these movies are set in. And if you brought that technology, not the weapons, but the technology, you could help elevate the world to that. And I think that's what Black Panther does at the end. That's the point of the movie, is to say, can't let our fear of being discovered stop us from doing what's right. We need to join the world and help elevate the world. But it's some of my frustration that how does this world exist that we would have no inkling, no knowledge of that they're there. And so sometimes that world building is a little too fantastical for me. It's the Superman Returns guy. Like, oh, well, that's just too much. This giant, in Aquaman, the giant kaiju basically just comes out of the ground, and there's nobody would know. We wouldn't have a sub that would go, hey, we got some kind of a disturbance going on over here in this area. Maybe it's Atlantis. No, nobody would know. Or Wakanda's having this huge battle in these ships that could fly in Guardians of the Galaxy level technology, and we have no knowledge of. And sometimes it's too much for me.
Yeah.
But I realized, nope, I bought the ticket, I'm into the story, and I have to embrace what the writer's given me.
Yeah, it's that tricky thing whenever you're part of a shared universe. It's like, wouldn't the rest of the world know about this, right? And you kind of just have to go, well, it's connected unless I don't need it to be. Unless it hurts the story, then it doesn't matter.
Right.
So just, enjoy your 2 hours and your popcorn and you'll be good.
But the Wakanda world is absolutely incredible, like you said, about all the different tribes and even when they go up to the mountain tribe and the level of detail that they put in the buildings and I even think M'Baku's throne room with the sticks and everything, the
Yep.
world building that they put around there is absolutely incredible. This long bridge across this valley, it's absolutely great. They do build a tremendous world for you in here that's hidden in this spot.
Absolutely. So final thoughts. Final thoughts on Black Panther.
I'm gonna let you go first, Craig.
Okay. I mentioned Bilbo and Gollum get a scene together. That's fun. I had that down here. But the big question I always have when I watch this film is, does Killmonger have a point? We've talked about General Zod off air before, and we'll talk about it again, I'm sure. But your good villains, your interesting villains, are the heroes of their own story. And clearly his methods are extreme. Like just killing everybody, rising up and killing everybody is not okay, and that's why T'Challa has to stop him. But the point about Wakanda being isolationist really is what I'm getting at, that they have the technology to probably cure cancer. When those magic beads got to be able to do that, right?
Right.
To solve world hunger, to solve so many of the world's problems, but they stay out of it. There's a line I was going to mention earlier, but now's a perfect time to mention it, where, let me see, who is it, the one that says it? His friend from the border tribe. What's his name? Wakabi. Wakabi says, you let the refugees in, they bring their problems with them. And then Wakanda's like everywhere else. And that seems to have that's been the Wakanda policy, is we just, we stay here, we take care of our own, because the rest of the world is going to basically, kind of ruin us, kind of poison us. And that's why they have this utopia. And so it's interesting that you have a villain that says, what you're doing is wrong, we need to fix this. But he's kind of gone off the rails in the way he wants to do it.
It's really good.
And then the last thing I just wanted to say was just to recognize the fact that this was nominated for several awards for Best Picture, Best Original Song, Best Sound Editing, Best Sound Mixing. It won for Best Costume Design, which you've talked about a lot, Best Original Score, which we've also talked about a lot, and then Production Design. So well deserved in all those.
So for my final thought, I think of two things. When you look at the movie Black Panther, you have to look at the character Chadwick Boseman played. And the two things that I think of when I hear T'Challa is mercy and morality. When his morality to tell his father and the elder kings before him, you were wrong, we have to fix this. And it's about, we're so afraid of being discovered that we would have a lie on the throne, and we would create a monster that would then come and try and tear everything down. And so his morality to say, you were wrong and I have to fix it so it's right. We have to do what's right. He says that so much. And so I feel like that speaks to the level. And then the other word is the mercy. Even as he's fighting in the second fight with Killmonger, there's a moment where he tells him to yield instead of just winning the battle.
Mm-hmm.
And then with M'Baku, he tells him to yield. Don't make me kill you. Like he's so far removed from, you're a threat to my throne, but I want you to yield. I don't want to kill you. Your people need you, is what he says to M'Baku. And so it's like that morality of doing what's right, but then also showing mercy, because even after Killmonger kills him and basically takes the throne and everything Killmonger does, he goes and has to fight him and as he stabs him, he carries him out to embrace that sunlight and says, maybe we can still save you, knowing they have that technology. And so I feel like those two words, morality and mercy, that you find in T'Challa, and I think that's what makes him such a strong king, is those two words. And then the other thing I think with this movie is Shuri's line when T'Challa comes back to Wakanda for the first time, and she says, "How many times do I have to teach you? Just because something works does not mean it can't be improved." And she's talking about the beads, the magic beads. And but I think when you look at that and you realize, this is why even Iron Man suits, Iron Man Mark 1, Mark 2, Mark 3, like it goes up to 42, it just keeps going on, is just because something works doesn't mean it can't be improved. And that constant push, that constant drive to improve and to be better. And even when T'Challa says, hey, they worked fine, you don't have to fix it. But no, we need to improve it still. There's more to do. And so I think it kind of highlights that whole part where as the movie ends and Wakanda is now going to come out to the world, it's like, hey, we're working, but we can be improved, and we can start to share, and we can start to move out and embrace things and help raise things and improve things. And so I think those two things highlight it for me.
And that is a perfect note to end on. So as we close, we just want to say thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to connect with us, you can find us on Twitter and Facebook. Email us at readingbetweenreels@gmail.com, or use the SpeakPipe app on our website. If you enjoyed the show, please tell a friend. And one last thing, our next episode is going to be a review of the Lego Batman movie. Send us an email or voicemail about your favorite moments from the Lego Batman movie, and we'll share it on the next episode.